Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the stream. We're going to get started here in a minute. Just give me a moment to get organized here. We're going to continue with some of the thoughts from last time, but also then, relating this to... This is going to be mainly current events today. Everything that's been going on. So let me just finish what I'm doing here really quick. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. So let's get started here. So, looking at my notes, this is gonna be we're gonna talk. I actually don't know that we're gonna be here like super long or anything like that. We're not gonna be here like for hours or anything. I think we're gonna be here for a little bit. But I just again wanted to speak a little bit, especially considering what I'm seeing with the current situation. Everybody knows about Charlie Kirk, and so let's start with that and let's get this out of the way. So we have to remember that there's going to be hate from both sides, and obviously, even if this is a hate-derived crime, which we can gather, obviously that's what this is. Obviously, any type of violence, that's what you're going to say, right? So, for sure, hate, but what you need to realize then is condemn it by all means on all sides. So, don't say good or anything like that. We want to condemn this. You don't align yourself with violence, because then, the whole point is that you wouldn't want that to happen to you or the people that you care about or you represent. So when there's violence on either side, whether it be towards Donald Trump or towards, I don't know, Obama or something like that, you don't recognize it. You recognize that it is evil, and you call it for what it is, okay? So let's get that out of the way, because that's the ethical, correct standpoint. So with that being said, recognizing that it's bad on both sides, let's recognize when people are immediately, the day after this person is assassinated, people from their party are now using that to fuel hate, saying like, you see, they are the problem, they cause all this hate, they, literally putting that on Democrats and stuff like that. Now, again, don't do it the other way around. Obviously it's bad that it happened. It's disgusting. It's terrible. We condemn that. But don't do it the other way around. Don't immediately start pointing the finger at everybody that is against Donald Trump now just because somebody tried to take somebody out that is popular among his party members. That doesn't make any sense. Don't let your own intelligence be fooled by just the fact that bad people want to do bad things. So anyway, hello, can you talk about something else? What would you like me to talk about? We're here to talk about some intelligent stuff and current events. Sorry about that. So anyway, that's where we need to arrive at and condemn that on both sides, okay? Absolutely. So, and don't listen to the people that are just shouting as loud as they can to like I said, blame a side or something like that. No, this is one person did this. It was an act of violence and it's terrible. Yes, let's talk about his access to the gun. Let's talk about the police response. Let's talk about why Kash Patel didn't say anything. Let's talk about those things, but again, let's not talk about it like it's the fault of one political side, just because it happened to be a political assassination. Okay? Please use your intelligence there. So let's get that out of the way. Now we're gonna define a couple of things, and we're gonna talk about why everybody's talking about fascism and stuff like this. Remember last time we talked about Nazi Germany? Remember last time we talked about Nazi Germany? What is this? Can you talk about what? Hold on. Who is this person? What do we talk about? What? So I'm just at a loss for what you're trying to get me to talk about. We're talking about this. So anyway, we talked about Nazi Germany last time, and we what we didn't get to was the downfall of Nazi Germany. So while Nazi Germany had the biggest economy, and you should have looked at that link that I gave you that showed that Nazi Germany, that was also their downfall. They didn't have free trade. Hitler constantly made really stupid decisions, which led to their military just being overrun so many times. And he refused to admit defeat, just like somebody else would. Okay? Just like somebody else is with even an election. Okay? And is not very intelligent and makes foolish, rash decisions, sort of like somebody else. Okay? And rose to power with misinformation and sort of, you get what I'm saying? Okay? So rationalize where in history, and this is what I'd like to tell you guys. I'd like to tell you guys, debating politics, and I wrote this down as a note. I want to read the statement that I wrote down. Politics and debating can only be done about present and future. And it is not done with what we know about the past. We don't debate the facts of what's happened. Now, sometimes we find out some information was wrong. Like, Lee Harvey Oswald, we always knew about him, but we didn't know he's an inside man, right? So, like, there's always, like, maybe some piece of information we're going to find out later or something like that. But for the most part, there's not some giant conspiracy where we didn't land on the moon, man. So, while maybe you could rationalize, at the time there may have been something that they kept from the public about the mission and stuff like that, because it was secretive, because we're trying to beat other nations to the moon and stuff like that. It doesn't mean that we didn't go to the moon. So realize the rational part Like, just start trying to develop that skill. It's a skill, but it shouldn't be difficult to do. That's what common sense is. That's why people say common sense isn't so common anymore, because that's the skill, is to be able to deduce yourself, the rational sense of the matter. Like, what sounds reasonable and believable about this situation, you know, and related to everything you've learned, everything you've been taught, everything that you've come to realize too. Use your own intelligence and then go, yeah, I've arrived at this conclusion. So anyway, moving on to the downfall of Nazi Germany, again, Hitler making terrible, stupid decisions, and even though it was the biggest economy, like, ever, aside from, like, now, obviously, yeah, it still was their downfall. So anyway, let's move on to a little bit more defining things and talking about some of the stuff we've been saying now, too. Okay. So, first off, let's talk about Nazi Germany a little bit more. And part of why we're talking about this, and we talked about this last time, is because this is very similar to what the current Trump administration is trying to push in this country, and what we're all seeing isn't something that's going to happen. It is happening. And oh, hey Chris, good to see you. Glad to see you back, man. Appreciate that. So this is what is happening. It's not what's going to happen. It is what we know is currently happening. Okay, so that's why we're talking about this, and I'm trying to help you guys understand. So, what was the main downfall of Nazi Germany? And again, I've told you guys this already, but I'm going to summarize Gemini's overview for you, so that we can actually all agree, and we can see the facts, and we can see the AIs agreeing too while compiling all of the data of the internet. You have to understand the reason why we can do this, especially with history, is because history is something we all have been taught. How many times now we learn this? We go to school, we learn it a million times, and it's embedded in our heads. And while some people in other countries might be led to believe that the United States lies in their education system and stuff like that, let me just interject a little bit and tell you, not really. Not really. There are things that are absent. That's what I'll say. like politics. They do not teach politics. They do not teach economics. And if they find out that you do, oh my gosh, that teacher and that administration's in trouble. They don't like this. But again, it's more like they're trying to not have anything to do with it. You're supposed to figure it out for yourself and determine for yourself, and not have any type of outside influence. And while I agree, you still need to be educated. So to the people that tried to understand and tried to educate us on how to debate and economics, thank you. Because if you hadn't done that, so the point is, they don't lie to us about like history and about information. It's just that, yeah, there's conveniently some things missing, and it's mainly about politics and propaganda. It's mainly just because that education system is controlled by the federal government and funded by them, and they don't, because there is two sides, it is a democratic republic, they don't want one side fighting about what the other side decides is okay and not okay at any given time in the public school system. And that's a really good valid reason. So it's tough to say that it should be, and it's tough to say how to do it, when to do it. It should be done, yes. That is the hard, correct decision. It should be done, but how to do it and when and exactly who should do that, I don't think the Trump administration should do it. But the point is, get somebody smart to run the Department of Education for once, and then we'll start seeing something happen. That's all I'm saying. So anyway, it's don't think that like Americans just don't know stuff and all that. It's really not the case. It really isn't, and I just wanted to put that out there. Also, we have freedom of information unless Trump somehow figures out how to undo the Constitution, and I'm going to get to that. But freedom of information allows us to find out the truth regardless of what Trump tells us. A lot of countries don't have that. Russia doesn't have that. So, anyway, what was the main downfall of Nazi Germany? And I already summarized this for you before, but let me read the AI overview from Gemini right now. Nazi Germany's main downfall was its defeat in World War II as a result of the combined strengths of Allied forces, including the United States and the Soviet Union, and significant German weaknesses such as overextended supply lines, starting a war on multiple fronts, and lacking a strong war economy. Now, do not let this fool you. Just because we worked with the Soviet Union a little bit, don't even think that. We didn't. All we did was we had a common enemy in Nazi Germany. The Cold War lasted a lot longer than World War II. It only ended in the 90s. And remember, that was between the United States and the Soviet Union. And you do not, again, that's just Russia now. So don't let that fool you into thinking that we're somehow friendly. No. We were never friendly with the Soviet Union. That was never the case. They were always backstabbers. Sorry, just wanted to interject that. Other critical factors include internal weaknesses like poor leadership. Yeah. The ultimate collapse of Nazi military and Hitler's refusal to surrender, which led to widespread infrastructure destruction and enormous loss of life in the war's final months. Yeah, that's absolutely accurate. It's a very, very accurate summary. It's extremely accurate. Because this was actually something slightly debated about for a long time, because the ends of the war were somewhat... Like, everybody was saying different things, because it was very political, initially. Of course it is. Of course it is. You know? But then, eventually history shows itself, and we start finding out, no, Hitler was blatantly an idiot. He was on drugs. Seriously, he was on drugs. And he just a raging lunatic. And that's who was leading Germany. And while people get behind somebody like that because they have a strong presence, a lot of times they just say very, provoking things, I suppose, revolutionized sort of concepts, but it doesn't mean that a lunatic should be trusted with the country. So there's signs of this, and recognize them. The signs are dictatorship, authoritarianism, the fact that by its own definition it's broken, and the person leading wouldn't have the intelligence to understand that. That's not a leader. That's why we try to teach you guys that guy shouldn't be leading anything. That's why we try to say that. Because almost any professor or intelligent historian is going to say the same thing. We have history to teach us this. It's by definition, authoritarianism and communism is broken. We talked about that last time. By definition, it's never even been obtained, technically. Technically, it's never literally been obtained. Ever. Because it's never worked. Even Russia, even the Soviet Union, as long as they existed, they never fully obtained true communist society, ever, because it doesn't work. It's fundamentally broken. By definition, it's broken. You don't sit here and claim to take all of the money and then claim that it's being broken up evenly when you distribute it back out. No, you're taking more of it for your military and your cult. Otherwise, it'd look more like the church. Right? Am I right or am I right? It'd look more like the church, where they would help and do things, kind of like the United States has looked for the past several decades. And we could get to some of those things, but I don't think that's important. I think it's kind of blatantly obvious now, with Trump being president as long as he has and all this chaos and shit. Excuse me, but I think it's kind of obvious to see at this point that you have absolutely a time of rest and unrest. You had a time of the 90s, the 2000s that were booming, and then now. There's no question. We remember Clinton balanced the budget in the 90s. We didn't even have a debt in the 90s. Remember that? So to everybody out there in the world, Democrats balanced the budget in the 90s. They really did. So don't forget that. When it wasn't teetering towards the hundreds of trillions. Because that kind of money doesn't exist. That's Trump spending money we don't have. So anyway, that's the whole point to you understanding we've seen this before in Nazi Germany. I mean, it's probably too late, but I hope not. And by the good graces of our friends and our allies are we only going to get out of this. And Trump single-handedly taking all of them off. Think Russia's anybody's friend? No, Russia's nobody's friend. Okay, so now here's something I think is really important. I think it's really, 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 really important. But I don't think a lot of people will. Please think of this as just as important as I do. Please. You ready? Now, I knew this, but I wanted to make sure. Okay, I asked Gemini, what was the main... Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, there we go. What was the main religion of Nazi Germany? You're probably thinking, "Oh man, these guys are Nazis. They're unalivers. They hurt people for a living, right? They probably didn't have a religion, right? Is that what you think? What do you think it was?" I'm sure Chris knows. Christianity. So, with the main religion as Christianity, it even says about 94% of the population identified as either Protestant or Catholic. And you think that Christianity and religion is the answer? I mean, it's still a system of control for people that aren't smart enough to get over... I've talked about this before, and we really shouldn't go into religion too much, but... Let me just say this really quick. and I've been asked this plenty of times, do I believe in God? Yes. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I don't. But I also don't believe that Jesus Christ was God. Okay? And I don't believe some book that somebody wrote. I believe in God. Does that make sense to you? It's a much more simpler concept than that. Be good to each other. Be ethical. The Bible has a phenomenal rule book about that. Follow it. Jesus Christ was absolutely the number one disciple. Follow everything he said, yes. But was he God? He died, didn't he? Oh, but he rose. No, they stole his body. God. You can't read a book and tell what happened? I'm sorry, but you don't want me to talk about religion. Because I'm going to sit here and I'm going to deduce everything that they just really misconstrued about what actually happened in the Bible. Okay? And it's full of crap like this of people killing each other in the name of God. It's full of crap like that. Instead of stuff like Michael Jackson was trying to spread around and everybody hated that guy. At a certain point. Nobody hated him originally, but everybody just like at a certain point started hating. And sure enough, it was after that whole heal the world stuff and he got all addicted to plastic surgery. Realize what psychological warfare does to the people that are popular in Korea and stuff like that. They were screwing with him. He was very popular in Korea. And I've discussed psychological warfare with you guys before. They knew he had depression and anxiety. They really messed him up. I guarantee it. And, you know, like the whole point is that these people are the ones that are trying to spread healing and world peace and stuff like that. And the whole point is that that would possibly bring the U.S. to their door, so they're trying not to make that happen. That's not the case. And I'd like to reach out to that country and say that the Democrats and anybody that would welcome free thinking and healing and peace wouldn't think that way. They would think, listen, you have to come to that on your own terms. The whole purpose of what we understand as the common consensus of peace is that we don't force, just like Vietnam, we learned we shouldn't force other countries to do what we think is right. They have to come to those terms. You can't interfere. You cannot. Otherwise, just like Nazi Germany, they push back and they will literally think the polar opposite. They will hate you, cast you out politically, because that's what happens. They think you're the enemy, that you're the devil trying to come and rip them away from their land. Even though a lot of times, like, you know, like the war in Afghanistan and stuff like that, it wasn't the case. Like, we tried to be careful and stuff like that, but it just proved that we shouldn't do those things anymore and only get involved, you know, like when attacked and stuff like that. Or we believe that our allies are getting attacked, so we aid them, we don't get involved. White Christians are number one on Alivers. Thank you for saying that, Chris. I know it's hard to talk about this stuff, but that's actually a real statistic. This is a real statistic. I think it's fascinating that you knew that and you mentioned that. That's real. I found that that was something I came to realize recently too, and I was like, huh. What do you know? I didn't know that either till recently. I wonder how many people know that. It's men too, isn't it? So anyway, bombshell there, right? Number one religion of Nazi Germany, Christianity. I'm not happy about it. I don't enjoy delivering that news. It's shameful. In God's name. And then you all say, how dare you, how dare you, like you sit here and hang on to little colloquialisms like, don't say take the Lord's name in vain. Like if you say God damn, that's somehow a sin. No, you don't get it. I think God would probably think that shit's funny. No, that takes the power out of the evil, saying it like that. Using God's name to actually condemn things. Like if you would say, God damn the person that did this to these people and stuff like that. No! There you go. There's the wrong. That's the sin. You don't God damn them. You don't condemn them with God's name. You don't anything them. You don't hate them at all. You love them in the correct way. And if this means helping them in the way they needed it, then yes. But the point is that this is the reality of what religion should be and isn't. And Jesus tried to teach us that, but nobody learned it. We all just have a bunch of pastors, and these churches erect themselves, and we give it to a collection plate. And then the only church that actually lasts is the super rich one with the pastor that makes millions of dollars. And then they put a bunch of churches, that treats it like a business. And suddenly you start understanding that the modern concept of why a church should exist is absurd. And that it even says in the Bible that a church isn't a place, it's a gathering of people in God's name, praying. That's it. That's a church. We could get in a group and pray every Sunday, or every Tuesday, or every whatever month even. You don't gotta do it in a building. You don't have to have rosemary beads. He's listening. So this is like, it's too big for people to like. I just feel like people hold on too much to their ideals. Like it topples everybody's world. You get what I'm saying? Too many people have been doing this Christian game for too long, following the rules, and they couldn't possibly be bothered to ever think that it's all a bunch of horse shit. Because I've already explained that times were always so rough, there was always so much war, always so much unaliving going on, that they needed to have a system of control. And it's not like God doesn't exist and they don't have evidence of that, we just can't prove it. And so we know we need to do well, we know we need to excel, and we know we need to figure out how to obtain world peace, but the more we just unalive each other and fall into the pits of despair, the more that's not the answer. So you needed those systems of control throughout history to tell people, don't do this, go to church, or else God's you're going to hell, and yada yada yada. Well, most people need that. I think that's the point, was that most people need that. Especially in those times. Because, like, that's the point. 94% of the population identified as Protestant or Catholic. Yeah, well, they're Nazis. They're killing people all the time. So they got to go to church and be forgiven. That's the point. They were actually having real PTSD. That's the point. And then, like, they would actually believe this. Like, you're going to be forgiven. And it's like, no, you're a Nazi, man. You didn't get it. So anyway, so the reason, again, that we talk about this is because Donald Trump and the current administration obviously is very much like Nazi Germany, and what's happening now with immigration and stuff in this country is very much like concentration camps, where all they did was rounded up all the Jews and threw them in some camps. And even at the time that they did it in Nazi Germany and stuff, they would try to make it seem like it wasn't a big deal, just like now. Oh, it's not a big deal, you know. It's just the way it is. It's the law. Or whatever. Doesn't make it right. One thing that you have to also realize. Now, I had thought this from my own information, but I wanted to ask Gemini anyway, just to be sure, and I was right. I asked Gemini, I said, did Nazi Germany have fair trade? And the answer is no. No, they didn't. So, oh man. Just that bad. Just everything being controlled. So Nazi Germany did not have fair trade. Its economic policies and international trade practices were hostile to the concept of fair trade, which is based on principles of fair prices, ethical labor conditions, and sustainability. The Nazi regime systematically exploited people and resources, and its trade was primarily designed to serve its military and geopolitical aims. Interesting. So, again, this is why we talk about, the tariffs and the trade wars, like, that the Trump administration's doing, like, essentially, like, just gearing us up for this. Here it is, yeah. Rather than ensuring fair wages and good conditions, Nazis abolished free trade unions and destroyed the labor movement. As the war progressed, they relied heavily on slave labor from concentration camps and occupied countries, a practice completely contrary to any notion of fair labor. Yeah, absolutely. In summary, do you want me to read all of this? Key characteristics of the Nazi practices, trade practices. Command economy. While Germany retained private property, the Nazi state imposed tight control over all aspects of economy, including prices, production, and trade. Businesses operated at the government's direction, not according to free market principles. You guys know that what I'm talking about here is you don't own property. You don't own anything. If you own a business, the government owns that. You're not the business owner. You don't own your own property. None of that. The government specifically gives you what they give you while claiming it's fair. And you know that, isn't it? You know the Nazis get better stuff. You know that. Concentration camps for the Jews. So that's the bottom. That's where all of us are going to end up. And meanwhile, anybody that's just like a Trump voter, they're going to be a Nazi in the military, whether they like it or not. While your leader just makes a whole bunch of really poor decisions that eventually leads to your downfall, and then Russia just takes over the United States. Or China. Probably China. Probably more likely China. Because Russia is actually possibly heading towards finally a dictatorship, but that all depends. Depends on the United States. Putting pressure in certain key areas where they can no longer put pressure. Or conveniently, Trump's in office and he removes the military presence. So anyway, that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about how, Nazi Germany, you didn't have those things. Economic exploitation and plunder. Nazi Germany's economy relied on the forced expropriation of assets from Jews and persecuted groups. After invading other countries, the regime's policy was to plunder conquered territories and enslave their populations to fuel the war machine. Remember, 94% Christian. Yeah. 94% Christian. So you guys wonder why... Like, it wasn't even just this, it was all the other times, too, that wars happened in God's name. But this is the type of stuff that told me what I needed to know about the history of Christianity and its merit. It again doesn't mean that God doesn't exist, but again, just like it doesn't make any sense to have a whole bunch of denominations that start thinking slightly different things, even though it's all the same God. How does that make any sense? Catholics, Lutheran, Methodist, Protestant. Oh my gosh. Episcopalian, Baptist. How many are we gonna have? It's ridiculous. It really is. The number of denominations. Maybe that's another Google search. I was just trying to think of them. Anyway. Non-market bilateral agreements. Facing a lack of foreign currency, Nazi Germany signed bilateral trade agreements with countries in southern and southeastern Europe. These were not based on equal partnership, but were coercive deals that leveraged German economic and political power to make these countries dependent on Germany for both imports and exports. Sounds an awful lot like what Trump's doing to Mexico and South America with the crappy stuff. Oh, in Canada, with the crappy random tariffs that he's forcing on them. You're here, just can't interact, but I appreciate it, Chris. Thanks, man. Yeah, like, again, this is just literally... like, Trump is actually doing a lot of this stuff. State-driven monopolies. The Nazi government encouraged the formation of cartels and monopolies, which crushed smaller businesses and were protected by the state. Remind you of something else Trump's doing? Like that's my point. Or you start like combined companies that take over certain slots that force people out. You get what I'm saying? As the war progressed... Oh, I'm sorry. Wrong paragraph. These arrangements further concentrated power and benefited the regime's interests. Next bullet point, unethical labor practices. Rather than ensuring fair wages and good conditions, the Nazis abolished free trade unions. I read this already, but I'll read it again. And destroyed the labor movement. As the war progressed, they relied heavily on slave labor from concentration camps in occupied countries as a practice completely contrary to any notion of fair labor. The next bullet point, military self-sufficiency. The primary goal of Nazi economic policy was to achieve self-sufficiency, known as autarky, to prepare for war. This meant heavily regulated trade, restricting imports, and prioritizing military production over consumer needs. And then that's where we have the summary. In summary, the Nazis' regime's economic and trade policies were authoritarian, exploitative, and ultimately served its aggressive, expansionist goals rather than promoting fairness or ethical commerce. And I agree with that. What a great summary. Now, again, we keep hearing this authoritarian word, and I feel like people are maybe oblivious to what this means. You know, you hear this a lot, you hear authoritarian a lot, you may be completely oblivious to what this means. So let's define authoritarian. Favoring or enforcing strict obedience to authority, especially that of government, at the expense of personal freedom. So that's the definition that we get here, the dictionary definition right here on Google. So again, favoring or enforcing strict obedience to authority, especially that of the government, at the expense of personal freedom. That's the concept of authoritarian. So, basically, you want Trump to take control of everything and take away your personal freedom. You want that. And we're all kind of acknowledging that you want that, saying authoritarian, and meanwhile, nobody's kind of recognizing that's exactly what the definition of this word is. So, I just feel like nobody, looks things up anymore and kind of, so that I just wanted to define that. Now, let's go ahead and define fascism. Did we do this yet? We'll define, I think we may have. If we didn't, we're going to define fascism. And part of why I defined authoritarian first is because the definition for fascism actually uses the word authoritarian in the definition. So that's why I wanted to go ahead and define that for you first. Okay? So let's look at the definition for fascism that it gives here on the AI. This is Gemini. Okay? The fascism definition given to us by Gemini here. It says fascism is a far-right authoritarian and ultra-nationalist political ideology defined by a dictatorial leader that the forcible suppression of opposition and the regimentation of society and the economy. Wow, that is a mouthful. Let me read that again. So I like that it defines it as a far right too, because it is. Fascism is a far right, authoritarian, and ultra-nationalist political ideology defined by a dictatorial leader. Dictatorial. I keep reading that wrong. Dictatorial. It actually says that. The forcible suppression of opposition and the regimentation of society and the economy. Fascism prioritizes the nation of race above individual rights and places a strong emphasis on militarism. Militarism. That's how you actually say that. Militarism. I don't know why I said it like that. Militarism. Again, this is they coincide. They're the same thing. Fascism, authoritarian. It's right there in the definition. Fascism is a far right, authoritarian, ultranationalist political ideology defined by a dictatorial leader that forces suppression of any opposition of him. Like, so if anybody opposes him, he forces you to go away. He forces that away. No, he doesn't welcome anybody to debate anything or debate him, or no, he just forces that away. And the reglementation of society of the economy. So essentially again, separating the economy from you. You don't get any of that. You're not entitled to it. You don't own businesses. You don't have a job. You have what they give you. That's what that means. Taking away economy, separating you, society, from having any impact on the economy. You can do nothing about that. They will completely control everything and you'll never get it back. Just like North Korea, just like Russia in modern day. Except hopefully, with Russia, they're going broke, and I mean, just like North Korea, they're barely hanging on too. They are. They have a real problem with crops. So that's what this does. Because you don't have all these different farmers and fair trade and like the whole point is nobody can own what they own. Like, so the government does it, and that's it. They don't actually care about doing it right. They just do it, and it's bad, and it's cutting cost, and it's... You get what I'm saying. Core characteristics, dictatorial leadership, a signal charismatic leader or a small group holds absolute power with the leader's authority seen as unquestionable. Yes. Authoritarianism and totalitarianism. Fascist regimes seek to control all aspects of society, including its politics, economy, and culture. Remember that, culture. And remember how I mentioned cancel culture as a real thing? This is psychological warfare. Don't sit here as somebody on the internet, specifically if you have a lot of followers, and publicly mock cancel culture. Don't do it. You will be manipulated hardcore. Because this is what they're doing. They want you to do that so they know that you don't believe cancel culture is real. And they're going to manipulate the crap out of you. You'll have no idea why you're not getting views, why this is happening, Meanwhile, they're actually canceling culture for you. And you don't know why, because you can't get ahead of it. You don't get that it's actually a targeted attack. Now, you could probably do something if you knew that, but you don't know. So meanwhile, they're just getting ahead. And right there it is. Right there in the definition. Authoritarianism and totalitarianism. Fascist regimes seek to control all aspects of society, including its politics, economy, and culture. North Korea does that same thing. And we know that we've had Americans in North Korea. They do not like this. We know that they use psychological warfare. They do not like this. So the whole point is that right now, with current events and stuff like that, they are relying on the Charlie Kirk thing. They are coming in the chats. Just like the guy that came in the chat and he was like, sick! Oh my gosh, it's sick! You have to be mad. You have to be really angry. No. Yes, condemn it. But no, not anger. Resolve. Solidarity and resolve. Be resolute. We will not tolerate this. We will always find anybody responsible for such lunacy. There will not be a continued unrest in this country. We will take care of it. We won't force people to think that they can't go out on the street and peacefully protest. What you should do is you should use the police and the FBI and all them to help you protest. Because it's your right. Instead of forcefully stopping you. Because you have a right to protest. You have a right to a peaceful assembly. In this country. Ultranationalism, there's an extreme and often exclusionary form of nationalism in which national identity is glorified and individual identity is defined by it. This often includes a fixation on national decline and a desire for national rebirth or regeneration. And remember how Trump's been talking about trying to live forever, and how he just keeps getting worse every time we see him publicly now, ever since mentioning stupid stuff like that? Like, it's like, if you test fate, man, there's one thing I've learned about life, is the moment that you do that, life goes double standard reality. Yeah. Yes. For sure. Militarism. Sorry, there's just a bunch of bullet points here. I just realized there's a whole bunch of bullet points. Militarism. The military is given a disproportionate amount of funding and power, and its values, such as discipline and obedience, are celebrated. Yeah. Yeah. That is dangerous. Yeah. Because it goes against the concepts of free thinking. Like, I'm all for about instilling discipline in like an education system when people are growing up and stuff like that, but you don't force militarism concepts on the general public. That's forcing. That's wrong. Suppression of opposition. We talked about this in the definition, but it's breaking this down very, very well. Fascists use force and violence to silence and eliminate all political opponents and dissent. Yeah, just like we talked about militarism, it's the same concept. Just using that. Yeah, Chris says governing political parties usually blame the ones who aren't in power. Yeah, well, that's what propaganda is. The part of the problem in the United States is that Trump started using this whole fake news thing, and people just bought it. That's all. That's the problem. The fact that nobody looks anything up and everybody just believes every little stupid lie he says, that's the issue, Chris. And unfortunately, for some reason, like it's sticking even with others, that as long as they support. So I think as long as Trump is around, that'll last. The problem that you have to worry about is copycats. And then people just wanting to jump on this whole, let's believe that's that side just because it's the far right extreme side. I don't understand. I would never understand that. You always look at something with a reasonable take. You don't. It just doesn't make any sense, obviously. With political stuff, the way you debate and the way you talk about things is always exactly what Chris says, where governing political parties usually blame the ones who aren't in power. Yes, absolutely. That's what you're supposed to do. It's politics. That's what you do. Except with Trump, he never uses facts. The things he says aren't true. And he actually is doing all of these terrible things that the Democrats are saying that he's doing. And so, like, it's very easy to discredit Trump. And so, like, the point is, everybody's jumping on the bandwagon of the guy that's wrong every single time he talks, and has nothing to say of any value. So the concern isn't that political parties are using propaganda. Like everybody knows that happens. The point is that people's ability now to just discredit Trump and discredit somebody when they completely blatantly lie, but then not back somebody like Harris or something like that isn't lying, that is ethical and truthful, that's dangerous. It's very bad, especially now that we've had 2 elections where 2 women, just because they were women, were ethical, good choices. And that, again, that's not somebody. I've told you guys that I come from wanting a good conservative to run. I actually want to vote for Republican, but we haven't had any good ones. So, like that's the point. Like, you have to recognize that I'm not the only one, that other people said this too, and so just, when somebody's talking fact, make sure it's actually from fact and look up what they say. That's all. Like, it really is, again, just like this. Eliminate political opponents and dissent. Use force and violence. Like, that's the point. And then scapegoating, we all know about that. I've talked about this before. This is going on like crazy. Blame for national problems is placed on specific scapegoated groups such as ethnic or religious minorities, immigrants, or political enemies. And that's exactly what he's doing, where he's rounding up a bunch of people in the country, putting them on buses and shipping them out, and blaming all the crap that's going on that he caused, because he didn't know what he was doing, on them. So he causes a bunch of problems, and yeah, you all recognize the problems, but meanwhile, it's him, and he just blames it on them, ships them out. It's right here. It's right here in the definition. It's not picking that from what Trump's doing. It's picking it from exactly the playbook of fascism. So remember, we're defining fascism here, and we're using Gemini to do it. And again, it's just listing bullet points of things Trump is doing. Since I was born in Greece, have been ruled by the socialist, slightly left, centrists, and the right-wing party. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's there was a lot of that here too for a while, where it was back and forth. But now, all right, so actually the majority of the population here doesn't like Trump. The majority actually, typically when they actually vote, the majority doesn't like Trump. When the majority shows up to vote, they vote for Biden, because we saw that. The majority just can't vote for a woman for some reason. And that's terrible. But the point is that Donald Trump's not well liked in this country. The majority doesn't like him. And for some reason, I get the impression that they're trying to get the rest of the world to not think that's the case. I don't know why that would matter, except if they want foreign policy influence to be the opposite. It's just so weird. So there's definitely weird things going on, and again, the majority doesn't like him because, again, this last election he barely won, and now, oh, again, when he won the first time, how our system works, he didn't win. When he won the first time against Hillary Clinton got, I think, 2.5 million more votes than him. He won what's known as the Electoral College. In this country, we have a system where voting the most times doesn't necessarily mean that person wins. And it's an old archaic system that should be gone because it was supposed to give more power to the small states, but it doesn't do that anymore. It gives even more power to the even bigger states. That's all it's doing. That's all it's been doing. Because Texas, California, PA, like all these states have huge amounts of electoral votes. And, you know, we know about swing states. Like, that's the point. They always swing the election one way or another. You know, and yeah, it's like we recognize the fact that the Electoral College needs to go away, but yet nobody's doing it. And now this guy's taking advantage of it by redistricting, what's called redistricting, which is something that's actually supposed to happen when it happens. It's not supposed to just randomly happen in the middle of a decade. It happens every like 8 to 10 years. Because that's the way the process should work, instead of just when the current president wants to. So he's trying to redistrict some states so that he can have more Republican control in those states, if that makes sense. Which means more delegates, more people of the Electoral College. You get what I'm saying? It's more of the electoral vote for him in that state. So the Democrats have been moving around, and that's where you're hearing them fleeing states to prevent these things. That's why they're doing that. They're actually trying to use the law and trying to fight back, but, you know, like, that's the point. He's just doing illegal things and trying to really, really seriously undermine the government here. And our political process, he has served 2 terms. He does not get a third one. Donald Trump should never be in office after this time, period. Otherwise, if that's the case, democracy doesn't exist in this country anymore. Period. That'll mark it right then and there. And he'll be a dictator. So you better pray and hope that never happens. You do not want Donald Trump, especially that guy, as a dictator. And not only that, but even if you were foolish enough to actually believe in him and stuff like that, he's old. And how long do you think he's gonna last before? You get what I'm saying? So even if it was that you believe in him, he ain't gonna last that much longer, and you want him? No. It's just so foolish. Everything's so foolish about it. Kirk's wife just became a future candidate, in my opinion. You have to understand that their wives don't necessarily want anything to do with it. While they'll always support them, like even like Melania, like, I don't think she wants anything to do with. I'm pretty sure she never did. Even like Michelle Obama was like a perfect first lady. Like, everybody agrees with that. But even she admitted to having her own setbacks. We'll call them setbacks. Her own little setbacks about being the first lady at times. But, you know, like, she did it with grace and I don't think there was a better one than her, but um, she was awesome. But yeah, it you know there she had there was times where it was obvious that she was pretty stressed with the position of being first lady, because you know the whole point is you're supposed to just be the president's wife, and it's not the case. It's a position, you know. And you find out they find out quick. They do. Um, but no, I try not to talk about that because I really don't think they want anything to do with it a lot of the time. To be honest with you, I think it just happens around them. Not even Hillary. I think actually Hillary may have been the exception. Hillary was always. That's why they were always. That's why they campaigned against her, and that's why anybody hates her, because she didn't actually do anything wrong. Um, she was investigated, like nothing happened. She didn't actually do anything wrong. The whole email thing, like she was ordered to do that. They grilled her on it and everything. With Hillary, she actually announced pretty early in her job as Secretary of State. She um, literally just admitted that she wanted to be in government, and I think she admitted she wanted to run for president. So it's the sort of thing where you get what I'm saying. You have to just rationalize that she shouldn't have done that, and that they were campaigning propaganda against her for like over a decade. So they like everybody just hated her by the time she ran, and it was all that. It was just propaganda. People just had it ingrained that no, not Hillary, no. But there really wasn't any reason. Um. So hold on. Is she pro-Israel? So let's just go ahead and get that out of the way, I guess. With the Israel situation, it's important to remember that I think most responsible people are just seeing this as a thing where no, it's okay. Where both sides are fighting, both sides are at fault. And so you don't take sides. You don't say I'm for this side, I'm for the. No, they're just fighting. No side wants to stop bombing the other side, really. They want something out of it. They want some it's a war situation that neither side is willing to admit that they shouldn't be doing. So you don't take sides. Now, we would take the side of Ukraine because Ukraine was telling Russia every day, hey, we'll stop if you stop. You invaded us. We will literally stop if you stop. They were saying that every day. So yes, then we take their side because they're being invaded. It's different. That, yes, you take sides. With this thing, with the Israel thing, really is just boom, 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 boom. It's just like the Korean War. The Koreans are responsible for it. Like, yes, China was involved and some other people definitely wanted that to happen and it helped some things for them, for sure. There's always some sort of political thing with the countries, the bigger countries. Yes, sure. How do you think the smaller countries get their guns? You see what I'm saying about the economy, the war thing? But that's not always, you don't do that. Like that's temporary. It doesn't last, and it's not good for economy in the long run. So anyway, the whole point is that boom, 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 that's just two people fighting. Russia and Ukraine, that is a situation where you can just be like, yeah, Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukraine was just sitting there minding its own business. That's it. And so fighting back, pushing back, well, Russia is saying we're not pulling away. Well, of course, then Ukraine can't. So that's where you'll side with Ukraine, because they're trying everything they can to get Russia to just stop. They don't want to destroy Russia, you know? So that's that situation versus the Israel situation where it's boom, 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 boom. And nobody wants to. So, U.S. governed, NATO has no strategy. I'm not debating. I respect your knowledge. So here's the problem. Here's the problem. Do you guys know that Trump pulled out of NATO? NATO, we aren't in NATO anymore because of Trump. The U.S. has nothing to do with NATO after Trump. We are not part of NATO. So that's why I'm not talking about NATO anymore. The primary, now there might be some residual things left over, but Trump is not working with NATO. And I think that's the case. There's going to be some residual stuff still from prior administrations and some policies in place, but Trump ain't working with NATO and NATO ain't working with Trump. Trust me. No, the UK is like the primary NATO benefactor, I think, now. I think. So basically, if we were talking about a democratic where the UK, nothing happened to the NATO and Hillary was in charge or something like that, I think what would happen is she would probably try to negotiate some sort of ceasefire that would be. So basically, what you have to realize is that these countries could be doing this to coerce the U.S. government to say, well, if we fight amongst each other for a little while, they'll give us a bunch of shit. You have to realize that. You have to realize that some of these leaders might really be doing that. So we can't do that. We can't just start saving the day. Because that's what happens. So I think she would completely ignore it. Because that's what you probably should do. You shouldn't have much of a say in the matter. Now, if we're talking about like them like nuclear arming and stuff like that and firing into other countries and now we're talking a little bit different. But a fighting amongst each other, I mean, again, how many times does that happen? And again, should we really intervene? So I just think ignoring it would be her best course of action, to not talk about it at all and to not listen to anybody that pressures her to talk about it. You literally ignore it. They're a bunch of children fighting amongst each other. That's the way you treat it. So that would be me. I would treat it that way. I would literally just call them a bunch of children. But, you know, I mean, like, that's what they are. They're a bunch of kids fighting. Who has the biggest gun? I mean, that's literally all it is. So you don't pay attention to that. You completely ignore it. You go about your business. In fact, if anything, as president, and somebody asked me that, I probably would make the statement, I literally don't have time to talk about such insignificant things. I'd probably say something like that. It might sound toxic, but the longer you think about it, the more real that is. It's so insignificant compared to everything else the president should be focusing on right now. The president of our country. So while I agree with you that maybe NATO could have a position at some point, they're not concerned about the Israel situation. Because again, NATO is against fascism, against communism, was mainly established to prevent the Soviet Union from continuing to take over Europe and the rest of the world. It was really out of that Cold War effort to make sure that that continues to stay away. So thanks for the no, that's a really good question to ask, and I think that's the way probably our Democratic leaders would handle it. Again, not necessarily with the same grit that I do, where I just would be honest and tell you I literally have much more intelligent things to do with my time. They would probably have something else to say that sounds a little less like that, but I'll be honest with you, I'm a lot more like Trump than Trump is. Like a lot of the way I would handle stuff and actually do stuff would actually be the way he supposedly wanted to do it. Except I would actually do it that way and actually probably have a smart idea, because I would listen to the people that have done these things before, and I would actually take their criticisms and ideas and not throw them away. If they had a good idea, I'd probably hire them. So... Yeah, that I agree with this, and that's probably what I would do. I would be like, well, what did Biden do? And I would look into that and consider that. And I actually like this. He has sanctions. He apparently placed sanctions. Biden's administration, however, applied some pressure on the Israeli government and has taken steps to sanction extremist Israeli settlers in the West Bank. So, honestly, I don't have the intel that our military has and stuff like that. And if I did, and I was sitting in that position of power, in the president's position, I would get that information too. Well, we think we should put sanctions here. And I'd be like, oh, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's try that. If it doesn't work, then we do something else, or we don't do anything until we figure something out. Because, that sounds pretty intelligent to me. That's not doing anything. That's just essentially, putting a grip on what they're trying to do. That's what that's going to do. And that is what you do. You put sanctions. That's what we did to Russia, too, to make sure that they couldn't do a whole lot. Okay, Chris, cool. So anyway, thank you for that again. And that was a really, really good point to talk about while talking about all this stuff. Let me just make sure that I got to everything that I wanted to prepare and actually get to, and then I may have a couple more points to make. But this wasn't going to be a super long stream today. I think I did. I think I got to everything. Yeah, that was my main point, is that you guys need to realize that the main downfall of Nazi Germany would be our main downfall. Would be exactly what Trump's doing. Lack of fair trade, You know, supply lines running short, things like that, where we tick off too many other nations. And again, we consume in the United States way, 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 way more than we produce. Like, we bring so much crap in, and we need that stuff. And we consume. So when you start cutting off all these other countries and ticking them off, it's going to be just like all these other ones that never accomplish what they wanted to accomplish, because again, they just destroy the world of its natural resources. You have to make the world livable and sustainable for all types of thinking, all nations, all people. It's what you must do. You must accept all cultures. It's just like in Star Trek, where they have that rule that, you know, unless a species has already made first contact and established their own rocket propulsion to get to space and stuff, they aren't going to tell them of their existence and of the existence of spaceships and stuff, because again, it would be culturally shocking. You know, it could cause a war, it could cause all these things. You don't do it. You let them. You don't interfere. You let them evolve. Because only through proper evolution do people actually achieve victory. Doing it themselves. Because that's how they retain it and learn it and apply it. Again, it's the concept of fascism and authoritarianism and communism in general is fundamentally broken. We've discussed this. It's fundamentally broken, does not function, does not work. We talked about how the primary religion of Nazi Germany was Christianity. 94% of the population believed in Christianity. And we talked about how, you know, that doesn't make Christianity a bad thing or an evil thing. But you need to recognize that that ain't the thing that's saving people. Recognize that. You recognize that that's not the thing that's doing it. You know, when Nazis are using this thing and it ain't working for them, recognize there's something flawed about that thing. I think I feel good about everything we got to, and yeah, I feel good about the stream today. The whole point mainly was to get on here and remind you guys that while this whole assassination happened, and there's unfortunately probably going to be others, what you have to realize about this is it's just singular acts of hate. Maybe they're manipulated psychologically by North Korea, Russia, whatever. But it's still singular acts of hate in somebody that's not strong enough to override their own hate. You condemn that. You do not allow people to use this for political gain. Like the guy that's at the Charlie Kirk thing where they're all talking, and he's sitting there for like 10, 15 minutes going on and on and on and on and on about how we need to never forget Charlie Kirk's name and stuff like that. You know, it needs to be embedded in your brains and stuff like that. You need to remember it. Like, really trying to drag this dude's name into hating the other side. He was just, like, literally, it was a hate speech to the other side. That was what he did. So recognize how fueled and fired up and hateful the side that votes for Trump is right now because of what happened. Recognize how dangerous and disgusting that is. And that is wrong. Condemn that. No, again, don't fight the person. Don't call them names. No. But the person that's doing that, they are filled with hate. They are being hateful. Remind them of that. So there you go. That was the main point, and that was, you know, again, also all the other stuff with the Nazi Germany and relating all of this to what we've learned about history. For sure. And again, like I said at the beginning, I even typed this as a phrase so I wouldn't forget it. You know, debating politics can only be done about the present and future and not with the past, not with history. We already know what we've learned from history. We've already tried that. It didn't work. And we can learn all these things from that. We don't debate that stuff. We already know that. We debate what to do now that we do know that. And you never do that again. That's the point. You never do that. Okay? Makes sense? So, yeah, don't be hateful. Don't sit there and say that it's the other side. And it's like, no, singular act of hate is not the other side being hateful. But what is the right side being hateful is when somebody says that's the right side, that's the hate. And what that is. Thank you guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Chris, for being in chat. Appreciate that. Appreciate everybody that was here to watch. Give me views. And stay safe, everybody. Trying to let your emotions get ahead of you too much, you know. And remember, always fight against this concept of fascism and authoritarianism. It doesn't work. There's no debate about that. It's a fact. That we know. Okay? Debate about what to do about it. About how to approach dealing with it. That's what we debate about. Remember that. Remember that's how we debate. Present and future. Not what we learned from the past. Thank you again. Thank you all. Take care.